Hi everyone, welcome to this month's edition of Be Live. My name is Euriza, and I am the HIV prevention and support worker at Positivis and the GMI partnership. Positivis is the largest HIV charity in East London, providing a range of services for people living or affected by HIV, as well as services to support people to stay HIV negative. This month, we're celebrating Women's History Month, and to highlight this event, we will be discussing the contribution of women in HIV prevention. Today, I have with me three amazing guests, Juddy Otti, Beatrice, Nabulya, and Winnie, Sseruma. For those of you watching us on Facebook, if you have any question they would like our panel to discuss or answer, please type them into the comment section. I will now give opportunity for my guests to introduce themselves. So, Juddy, can you please tell us a bit about yourself and what you are currently working on?
Thank you, Euriza. Like you said, my name is Juddy Otti. I wear various hats. I work with an organization called African Advocacy Foundation, and this caters for people from African origin with health issues, FGM, mental health issues, and preparing people to get back into work. My role there is more around supporting the people living, coordinating the support group of people living with HIV, as well as the prevention arm of it. And this is mainly around PrEP. And then I wear another hat where I work with an organization called the Sophia Forum. And the Sophia Forum also is an organization that's supporting women mainly living with HIV, but also does preventative work. And I'm working on a project concentrating on women aging with HIV, and we're looking at the issues that affect women aging with HIV with an aim of creating a program that will support these women in the near future. Those are the main hats I wear. I do wear several other hats, but mainly it's around prevention of HIV that I do. Yeah.
Thank you. Winnie, please.
Thank you. I am an international development consultant. My work really, my main work, at least before COVID hit, was really around monitoring and assessing projects that are community health and social enterprises in Africa, in 20 countries in Africa. So I used to travel quite a lot. But I still reside in the UK, and while I'm in the UK, I work on various projects. At the moment, I'm working on a project called Let's Get PrEP, raising awareness among African communities around PrEP, around the access of it, around how it works, and all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Beatrice, Nabulya.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. I said, my name is Beatrice, and at the moment I work with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation UK. This is a global organization that's based in America in Los Angeles and operating in 43 countries, offering HIV treatments and advocacy to different communities. Here, our organization in the UK just started in 2019, and we're based in Croydon, where I live as well. And the reason was because of disproportionate numbers of undiagnosed HIV within Croydon. So we came here not to bring treatment, but to do the prevention work and try to reach out to those people, find the people, do the prevention work, and encourage them to take the HIV test. So I work with the AHF UK as testing and prevention lead.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. So my first question is, according to the Public Health England, the proportion of late diagnosis declined from 62% in 2008 to 50% in 2017. how do you think, as people working in HIV prevention, can we continue to help this number fall? Could be any of you ladies.
I will attempt to, to respond to that. I think one of the things that needs to be said first is that people living with HIV, and maybe focusing here today on the third of women living with HIV in the UK, the majority of women are on treatment, and most of them are suppressed. So they are contributing to that reduction, okay, of transmission within the UK. Okay, I think what needs to be done, in my view, is to advocate a little more around the undetectable and the untransmittability of HIV, because while a lot of people know about this concept now, it's actually the practicality of it. It's about empowering the women who are living with HIV to use that concept to get on with their lives, but it's also around building some advocacy around that, for those who haven't tested, for other communities to update them on where we are with the science, so that they can come forward to test, get treatment, and continue the reduction of HIV within communities.
If I can add, Winnie, thank you for that. And if I can add, I think another aspect to this is the language we use in trying to communicate the urgency to test, the need to test. We've seen previously where we are looking at terminology like if you're at risk, and I think we really have to undercover this statement and break it down for certain communities, because risk is relative, risk is different. And if we tailor our messages to the communities we are trying to reach, break it down, then it's easier for someone to assess whether they actually need a test or they don't. Because I think many times people think they don't need a test, but we have to be real in how we explain the risks, explain who actually needs a test, or normalize it so that it's just like you would go and have your car MOT'd, for example. And once in a while, you just normalize that and know you've got to have an HIV test. And I think that's how we can get these numbers down.
I think you've made a very good point, both of you, and I like that bit around addressing the language that we use. And when you look at it, a lot of research has also shown that the majority of women who are diagnosed positive, they did not consider themselves at risk, because you're only having sex with your husband, with your boyfriend, that one person. But then somehow you find yourself, you've actually been infected. So I think that is a very, very key thing. I personally feel everybody who is sexually active, anybody who has not tested, and that is the message I always take out in our testing when we're doing outreach or reaching out to people. I'll always say, if you're sexually active, you have not tested in like the last year, or depending on what people have been up to, 6 months, please go and get yourself tested. And I think we need to bring that normality to say that people need to take better care of their sexual health overall, not think of like, oh, it's for those people who sleep around, oh, I'm married, or I'm this and that. Those are the myths that are giving us a lot of problems. And I think in addition to that, I know we're trying to like reach out to the women and girls, but if we're going to do that, we need to be talking to the men as well. So this should be the overall community, because we may empower the women to be able to send them and go and do the test. But if they are in a relationship and unable to talk about those things as a couple, as a family, then it's not going to happen. They'll be too scared, or maybe because of whatever else is going on. We need to have that kind of like community addressing all. If we're working with the women, then we need to have special programs that work with the men, and then we bring both teams together.
Yeah.
All right. Which will take me to my next question, which is, do you think there needs to be different ways engaged with African women with HIV prevention in comparison to African men?
I do think, and can I ask that you address this question to a particular person next time, you know, so that different people can start to respond to the different questions. Sorry. But I think we you know, as Beatrice was saying, we need to engage men and women both within our communities, okay? As women, we don't, you know, live in a vacuum, or we don't, many women, you know, have families, have children, have husbands, you know, many women live, you know, if you are targeting just a woman, I think it's difficult for them to take that initial decision, because then she has to ask the husband maybe, then she has to find people to look after the children. So it's about how we engage with both women and men. And you know, and then when we've engaged both women and men within the space that we've engaged both women and men, we can then talk to groups of men by themselves, and then groups of women within that space after engaging them, because then we have to deal with different issues for different groups. But I think we need to engage both and take into account that many women, you know, have families and children.
I will add, in the discussions of both and then separating is a really good idea. We have to be aware of the different cultural practices that happen in different contexts, especially if we are now looking at Black African communities. And we have to factor those in how we tailor our communications and our messaging. Many times, especially when we're here, the agenda is so set at one level. And we have to understand that communities are multi-layered. We can never go with one message, one level, and it will speak to everyone. So even when we're engaging the men and engaging the women, we still have to break this down and tailor it. You know, the risk as a woman I will have is very different. The sexual practices I may be practicing may be very different from another woman. And how do we tailor this message so that someone can understand the risk and have a healthy, positive sexual relationship with partners without putting themselves at risk?
And in addition to that as well, I think we need to engage in conversations from quite an early age as well with our children, because we don't have communication within families. And we always think, oh, they'll find out these things at school or in school. It actually should start in the home. Whether I'm alone as a single parent, whether we are a couple, we should be having these communications so that our children, both especially our young girls, they get to know this stuff and they can talk openly, because when they do that, chances of them being then lost in the community with their peers or trying to fit in are reduced. So then we are addressing all these issues that our young women and girls are actually facing. But still, I would like us to go back to the fact that a lot of responsibility has been, how do we help women and girls? And I'm thinking, actually, it needs to be, how do we, if we're going to do that, we know we have all these gender imbalances. I think the biggest people we need to be focusing on are the opposite sex, the men. They play a very big role. when you talked about delivering some sessions for women and then for men, I thought that actually if we do that, then we have another one that brings all the parties together to look at the different things. That's a very good way of starting and getting engaged with that. And likewise, if you have like the young people or the children, then you have them and then you have the parents and then you bring so that both sides can get to hear, because they may not be able to start that at home, but actually when they hear it from other people, then that will probably prompt them, will inspire them to think, I think this is very serious and we need to be addressing these issues.
Can I add something else to that? And I really do think that we need to think about addressing HIV within the broader context of sexually transmitted infections, not on its own, so that we can, take a little bit of the fear and the stigma out of just HIV. If you address it in the broader context of sexually transmitted, infections, then people can test for all sorts of different other things without quite isolating HIV on its own. And then we can, move forward with that agenda. And also to encourage people that if they're talking about good health, and I hear a lot of religious people, not that I'm not religious, I'm more spiritual than religious, but I hear a lot of religious people saying, you are nothing without your health. Well, sexual health is health. So why are we not dealing with the sexual health? It's part of a broader health of every single person. So I think we need to really sort of reframe that, repackage it, and see how best to, to get people to actually test. Because now the onus is not on people living with HIV, it is with people who have never tested for HIV and who are out there, scared of not going for a test.
When it comes to sexual health within the African community, we don't talk about sex. It's a taboo. And then when it comes to young girls and women, like they tend to, they're made to feel ashamed. And like the other day, I was having a conversation with my daughter about CC card, and she was saying like at college, when a boy has a CC card, he's cool because he's having sex with girls. That's what boys supposed to do. But when the table turned and a girl has it, so she's ashamed. So how can we overcome this issue, and how can we engage with sexual empowerment for young women?
I would like to challenge the statement that we don't engage in sexual health or we don't talk about sex. I think we talk about sex in a different way. I will talk about sex with my peers. If I'm married, I will find women who are married, we will talk about sex, we'll talk about issues within our marriage. We have those discussions. I think the men also have these discussions, whether it's in a bar among their peers, they have these discussions. I think we are looking at having sexual conversations in the open on platforms openly, which is something we don't do, but we do have these conversations. So it's how do we tap into these conversations within peers to empower the peers to have these conversations in a positive, healthy way with facts and not just myths, but how do we help those conversations take place?
I would like to come in, and hopefully Beatrice will also, be able to add to that. I do think that you're right, that, these sexual conversations go on. But I really do feel that heterosexual couples do not engage with each other in terms of sex, the men and the women. Yes, they engage in their separate groups, but they do not engage with each other. And there lies the problem. If they can't engage with each other, then they can't engage with their children, you know, to be able to talk about that. And I also do think that within our communities, we talk about sex only as a part of giving birth, only as part of a marriage, you know. But we need to start talking about sex as pleasure, safe sex as pleasure. And that is something that is really missing. You know, people are almost afraid to have sex just for the, you know, for the pleasure of it. You'll find people who will use that, you know, to shame people. So it is really important, you know, that that we talk in the way, especially with young people, because either young people then become afraid or they don't talk to their, to, you know, to older people about it, you know, having sex, because, you know, because those conversations haven't been heard.
Interesting conversation. I think what we need, normalizing, which will probably, I don't know, I hope it will happen. We all do it, but we don't want to talk about it. And it's interesting you brought that subject. One time we were testing at a football event, and this guy, because it was mostly men, this guy comes to test. And when he does the test, he says, oh, you're actually doing the HIV test, calls the partner and says, oh, listen, this is what is happening here. Would you like to come and do the test? And what did they get? So those are some of the mentalities we have, that if somebody is testing for HIV or any other STI, it means they've been sleeping around. When are we going to learn to look at it as looking after our sexual health, our overall health? Because our overall health, like I check my blood pressure, measure my weight, I actually need to be looking after my sexual health. At the end of the day, all of us are products of sex. We do it, we don't want to talk about it. That's why it becomes a taboo. And if we don't talk about it within our home family, within our family settings, it's unlikely that the children are going to talk about it. And now they have social media that's feeding them with a lot of like garbage and that, and there's a lot of abuse. Because every time when I go out and I want to address, to talk about HIV or sexual health, people say, oh, we'll give you the young people. But actually, this is an age, it's not an age-limited thing. If we were comfortable on the ground as community, it would be so much easier, because it means that what we are talking about, we are taking it to our children as well. I mean, if we have it within the family, it means that our children will be more comfortable having these conversations. So how are we going to take away that disparity between the men, the girls and the boys? It's because it's okay for the boys to talk about it, but it's not okay for the girls. So we still have that mental, we need a change of the mindset, because it's actually rubbing onto our communities. And then when you go into schools and colleges, the teachers are even worse. They don't have a clue, because they fall in the adult category. So they don't want to know these things, because they feel ashamed to be talking about sex and race, unless they are working within that sector. So I don't know what we're going to do to actually make sure that we have that engagement and normalize the discussions and making them like a day-to-day thing. Maybe when we're talking about all these other health issues, this should also be like merged. So it's not seen as something that needs to be looked at separately, but it's part and parcel of the good health that we're seeking.
Thank you. Okay, my next question is, on the PrEP impact trial, just 4% of those didn't identify as gay, bi, or other men who have sex with men. How can we encourage women and teenage girls to use PrEP? And I will add to one Facebook question. Just a second. The Facebook question says, PrEP uptake is low in African communities. How can we increase uptake in this group? Winnie, please, can you answer?
I mean, you know, my worry is, you know, that there are all of these things we are talking about as challenges, you know, and sometimes we fail to talk about the good things that are happening within our communities, because we're saying, oh, this is, you know, Black communities are not taking up this, Black communities are not doing that. Well, what is it that we are doing well? Okay, you know, there are a lot of things that we are doing well, and I hope we can get to those, you know, and we can, you know, we also talk about that. And that's why I was saying that women who are living with HIV, especially African women, are, you know, taking their treatments, they're undetectable and all of that. But in terms of PrEP, I think the PrEP issue, you know, is a complex one. I don't think there is one specific reason. First of all, the way that PrEP was targeted, even in the media, even, you know, during trial, it was targeted to gay men in the very beginning. And that was a challenge right there. So, first of all, African communities, especially women, didn't think that it was for them. So there is almost overcoming that. There is raising awareness to say that, you know, this is PrEP. There's also PrEP for men and for women. There's, you know, also a way that we are framing the sort of advocacy around PrEP. You know, are there options? You know, who is doing this work? Is there anybody who's specifically doing this work? This work is all in bits in different places around the country, especially before COVID. And now we have to adapt that work, you know, by doing it over, you know, Zoom. So how do we adapt that work? I know that through the project that I'm working on, Let's Get PrEP, we as a group of people who are part of the project have had to educate ourselves, you know, with PrEP itself, the availability, who's taking PrEP, and that is the basis where we have to start, you know, before we even start raising awareness within the communities. So a lot of education has to go on, you know, but it is important in terms of the way how we can package it and, you know, and deliver it to communities.
I don't know, I want to challenge something. When you said at the beginning that when PrEP came, it was targeted to the gay men, I don't know whether that is right, because my experience was it was actually available for both gay men and our communities, because we were the two groups considered as high risk. The difference was, while one group saw the value of the PrEP, the other group did not even want to know, because remember, all these things are associated with the stigma attached to the HIV, and it's talking about what we're talking about is talking about sex. So when you went to our communities, there was a lot of like conspiracy theories about another treatment coming up. But on the other hand, people not knowing a clue. I encounter that every single day. People don't know anything about PrEP. They don't even know about the simple things about transmission, about HIV. They don't know about U equals U. They don't know about PEP. So how are they even going to access it when they don't even understand the value? The minute you mention anything that has something to do with HIV, people just say, I'm fine. Oh, no, not those things. I don't want to know that. So I don't know. It's the education still needs to happen using, now that we have the PrEP, and make people understand what the PrEP is, because over the past few weeks, we started sending out home testing kits, and in the process of having discussion, I've actually encountered a few people, and they don't know anything about PrEP and all that. And I've been giving them information, and actually they are grateful for that. So every little opportunity we have, we utilize it, but then we also need like bigger campaigns that are going to to enable us to be able to pass out that information. And it is at all levels. I don't know how we ever, I mean, you start small and somehow maybe you make the progress, but we definitely need the education. That's the biggest barrier.
I'm going to be a bit controversial.
Go on.
Because I agree with Winnie, the messaging for PrEP was directed to gay and bisexual men. But my controversial issue is the investment that has been put in the awareness of PrEP has not been equal. The investment that has been put in making PrEP aware, accessible and knowledgeable in the gay community has been over more years than they have invested in the PrEP in African communities. And we are not at the same level. And this is why there is a huge knowledge gap. And like you said, Beatrice, you can't take what you don't know. A lot of people we are approaching, I did the PrEP and Prejudice campaign. We did groundwork in terms of knowledge of base of PrEP. Very few people, and what surprised us, even people within the health sector, even people working with our own communities did not know what PrEP was. And this is because they did not choose not to know what PrEP was. We have to acknowledge the investment that has been put in raising awareness of PrEP has not been equal. And we have to also factor in the time it will take to build that knowledge gap, just like it did in the MSM community. We can't say they've had 8 years plus of investment. Why are we assuming we will do it in 2 years? It's impossible.
Can I add one more thing, to both of your contributions? First of all, we are also presuming that everybody knows what PrEP means. So let me spell it out. PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Meaning?
And it's a treatment that is taken by people who are not HIV positive to prevent from getting HIV. So that is one thing that we also need to do. Because we're in this sector and we are used to abbreviating these things, sometimes we go on, and not explain things. And there, and we become part of the problem. So I just wanted to say that. The other thing that I want to say is I remember working with PrEPstar many years ago, before even the PrEP Impact trial. And this was, on my own initiative. I approached them to train community advocates, African community advocates, to talk about PrEP. That was a long time ago. And they were trained, but really nothing came of it. And I think part of the challenge that we have within our communities that maybe is not such a big challenge. Our communities are huge, African communities, they're huge. Gay men, especially white gay men, invest their own money in their own community initiatives, in their own social, places, invest their own money. But we as communities in the African communities have to wait for funding, to apply for funding. And we have to deal with what the funders want, not what we want. So there are all those complex issues. It's not, it has to be unpacked. We have to think differently. I think the way COVID has showed the inequalities among Black communities is an opportunity for us to do things differently and to see how best we can address some of the issues to reduce the health inequalities within our communities.
Thank you. So going to my next question. The Well Project published an article on mental health and HIV. It stated that studies show there is a direct connection between depression and poorer health for those living with HIV. How have you seen women's health and well-being supported in services? Beatrice, if you can.
You invite me. I didn't actually quite, my hearing is very bad. I didn't quite get that. If you can post it in the message. I was trying to
Can I speak about my own personal issue, my own personal journey? Because that's all I can speak about. I mean, we are all very different people, and you know, and people experience different things depending on where they're at. As a person living with HIV, I've been able to go out there and seek services that I need when I need them. Okay. For instance, I remember many years ago when service, a lot of services were available, and I was approached to see if I needed counseling, and I said, if they're looking for people who want to access counseling, I'll go. I didn't feel that I needed counseling at the time, but the services were there and people were not accessing them. Having access counseling, it is one of the best things that I feel, happened to me. I really, really felt that even though I went in not thinking that, it is something that I needed, I felt that it helped me a lot, and, and I recommend it highly. But it's about people, identifying what they need, as people, and then being able to access those services. The other thing that I want to talk about, also that may not be very, it's something that maybe people, talk about. I remember going to support groups. The way that they were sort of, the way that they were sort of framed, during the mid-90s, where it was a crisis, people were dying, people needed to talk to each other. But I felt that, I outgrew the support groups as they were set up. First of all, when I started to facilitate, to help facilitate some of the groups, when I would go back as a patient to sit down and access support that I needed, I would be approached by others, for help. And I wouldn't get the help that I needed. So I actually stopped going to the support groups. And I had to create my own support network that I felt, I could get support from. So I just wanted to put that out there in terms of the question that was asked, just talking about my own personal experience.
Winnie, thank you. And I think one of the things I would add to that, first of all, acknowledge that women have been very proactive in trying to help get, to seek help, or, when we compare them with men, women do engage with the healthcare system. They will identify they have issues, they'll try and seek help. What I think we have to do is tailor these services to the needs of the women. Even when you have counseling, is it counseling that is tailored to the person in front of you? Otherwise, they will feel they never got anything out of it. And again, it comes back to my issue earlier on, where we are not, we have a monologue, a one level service. We really need to learn to tailor services to different people. The service you will provide to an African woman may not be the service you provide to an Asian woman, may not be the service you provide to a white English woman. And how do we tailor these services? If someone's experience when they go to seek help is not fitting to what they need, they will not go back. But I think we have to give women some credit. We do engage, we really do, But it's around getting the service you are looking for, fulfilling the needs you're trying to address. And if we don't provide a service that fulfills those needs, then we are failing. And maybe the way around that is to involve women in creating these services. Let them be part of the design, the co-designing of these services, so that by the end of what has been designed, their needs have been put into consideration and the service is fit for purpose.
I think to complement to what, to add to what Jude just said, when we talk about the African woman, who is an African woman, we have very diverse cultures, and that has a big impact on how we are going to receive and benefit from those different services you may be offering. So you can't bring it out and say, okay, this is for all African women, and think that it will accommodate me from Uganda and then somebody from Nigeria, from Ghana, from where. We're all different. You need to engage with them at that level. That's why we're engaging with the different communities at the grassroots levels can make a very big impact, because you're talking with people who speak, you're engaging with people who speak the same language. I don't mean language as that. Will I understand their culture and they know how best to then reach out and make an impact within their individual communities. But there is a tendency to think that, oh, this is going to be beneficial to the African community. There's nothing like African community. They are very, very different and completely different in terms of if you want to get out and give them the service that was going to make an impact. You need to go in and actually work with them individually, and then they will table it to make sure that it meets the needs that they're trying to get up to.
Thank you, ladies. Can you outline one achievement or accomplishment in HIV prevention that you feel has been a game changer in eradicating HIV?
Eradicating or reducing transmission?
As well.
For me, of course, as a person living with HIV, it's treatment, it's HIV treatment. Although I know that HIV treatment on its own, without all of these other services, wouldn't have worked as well. But, treatment has been amazing. And many of us who are living with HIV would not have been here, would not be alive without treatment. The treatment that is being used in PrEP is part of the HIV treatment. So it's also being used in, preventing HIV. We've also seen, during the COVID pandemic, that some of the HIV treatments have been trialed as treatment for, treating COVID. So HIV treatment, as experimental as it was in the beginning, and the leap of faith as people living with HIV that we took to access it in its experimental sort of stage without having, been tested widely, has been amazing. Because now I can say that as a, as a person with HIV, I can't pass on HIV. How amazing is that? You know? So that's a huge achievement. But, you know, we need to turn that achievement into convincing communities that, you know, if they test, they can actually live well and not pass on HIV anymore. And for us as people living with HIV, especially women, that we can't pass on HIV, even not, you know, we can't even pass on HIV to our babies. So for me, HIV treatment has been amazing.
Winnie, to even add to that, the HIV treatment has enabled women to have babies, men to have families. I mean, when we look back and not so long ago, the discussion was very different. Once you got a diagnosis, it meant you had to give up the option of having children. And, you know, if you look at it now, a person who gets a diagnosis and gets treatment really lives, in most cases, will live a very well-lived life like anybody else, able to do everything that anybody else without HIV can do. This was not the scenario, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we have to celebrate that. And as a result, that's the message we have to portray. That's the message we have to shout about. That's the message we have to deliver to people so that they can understand the benefit, and it will break the stigma associated with HIV to actually see that it's not the end of the world. You know, it's actually a good thing. If you know early, you will manage it, you will live a fulfilling life. If you want to have children, you can have children. If you want to get married, if you want to take a career in any, you know, right now with HIV, you can work in any career space you want, so long as you're undetectable. And these are things we really have to celebrate. And the story was not the same 15, 20 years ago.
I think I couldn't agree more with all what you're saying. When you asked us this, I wrote down U equals U, the combination prevention. I think we have the biggest tools now and really no excuse. It's like reawakening the prevention work that we've been doing over the years. There's really no excuse, and everybody just needs to get on board. Everybody needs to be educated. Earlier on, when he was talking about PrEP and saying, we're saying PrEP, but what does it mean? So we have the pre-exposure prophylaxis, a treatment that somebody who is HIV negative takes that's going to stop them from being infected with HIV. I always relate it to when I travel to Uganda and I take anti-malarials because they protect me against getting malaria. But how many of us are aware of that? Many people are not aware of that. And then we have the PEP, the post-exposure. If I have been exposed to the HIV, maybe a condom broke or been sexually assaulted or needle stick injury, I can just walk through to the GUM clinical accident and emergency within 72 hours, which is 3 days. The earlier, the better, 24 hours. And I'll be given a course of treatment that I can take for 4 weeks to 28 days. Even if the virus has got into my body, I'm not going to become HIV positive. I mean, who ever thought about that? We have lost friends, we've lost family, we've lost siblings because of the HIV, and now we have all the answers. And then in addition to that, as Winnie and Judy were saying, we have the treatment itself. If I get diagnosed with HIV and I'm put on medication, after 6 months of taking my treatment as prescribed, I'll become undetectable. If I am undetectable, which means the virus has been suppressed, it's reduced, it's weakened, I cannot pass it on, it is untransmittable. So what excuse do we have for not testing? What excuse do we have for not seeing the end of this epidemic? It's time for everybody to wake up, go and get yourself tested, because it's the only way you can find out that you actually are HIV positive or negative. And even if you test positive, it's not the end of the world. You will still be you will still be able to get the medication and be able to lead more or less a normal life and have children and all.
Thank you. And also in terms of services, I would say like in the early times, like in early 90s, like the services provided was more to support people in their late stage of their lives. And then now we move from that, and now it's about supporting them to live like a healthier and fulfilling life. So it has changed a lot, like because of treatment and also the services provided by so many organizations. So we don't have enough time. One last question for you, ladies. If you can name a woman, who would it be? Like someone that you're really proud of, been doing a great work in the field, or not?
Can I start? I think
Yes.
saying one woman is really unfair. For me, you know, the thing I would like to do is to just say that, you know, I am inspired by other Black women out there, you know, and I feel a sense of accountability to even the women that went before us, and you know, also to, you know, to the sacrifices they made, and you know, and to change the future. So really, I don't think as Black women we get enough, you know, we get enough, for instance, like patting on the back, like, you know, what we do being acknowledged. I think about the Black women in Africa who are sustaining whole communities, looking after children, grandchildren, older people, you know, yet, you know, it is very difficult, you know, to get funding, you know, for those community organizations. But if it wasn't for Black women in, you know, in Africa, I don't know where we would be. And maybe one last thing, I just want to give a shout out to, you know, all the Black women living with HIV, you know, for being resilient, to pay homage to them and to say that we are still standing. Let's keep on doing what we do and supporting each other.
Okay. Thank you. Beatrice or Judy, can I please have your last statement in 1 minute, please?
I think like Winnie, when you said one woman, I could not find that one woman, but I was celebrating the amazing women, especially women living with HIV who are overcomers, women living with HIV and part of like the For Mental Mothers Network, supporting other women who are mothers coming through, and women like ourselves who are like battling with the HIV stigma and the education as well. We need to celebrate ourselves before we celebrate anybody else. Our parents who have gone before us, and all those incredible people who are making a lot of difference in a lot of different lives, besides looking after their families regardless. Now we have the COVID that's been a big challenge, and many women have actually stood up for their parents despite all the challenges that are happening behind them, and the young youth leaders as well that we have on board.
Thank you. Judy?
All seems to have been said and said really brilliantly. I think looking back to the last, I've been in this sector for the last 10 years. There's a group of African women that have led these conversations, that have fought for a seat at the table. And I can't name all of them, but they know themselves, and some of them are here with us today. And they have really fought for our voices to be heard, for our presence. And I would really applaud them for that. And like Winnie said, we're still going strong. So thank you. I think without them, a lot
Thank you.
would not have been done. So.
Absolutely. So we're coming towards the end, and we would like to thank our amazing panelists for sharing their knowledge and expertise and experience. And thank you all of you watching us on Facebook Live. So if you have been impacted by any of the themes that we highlighted, if you want to have an HIV STI test, or whether you live in or affected by HIV, get in touch with us at www.positivist.org.uk. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you know. Thank you and see you next time.
Thank you.